I've spent over 20 years working with cannabis, from activism in the UK to running a cannabis club in Spain. Hi, I'm Sarah Sativa. I've been involved with cannabis for over 20 years now. I grew my first plant back in 2003 and since then the plant has played a huge role in my life, both professionally and personally. But my relationship with cannabis actually started earlier than that. When I was younger, I discovered that cannabis helped me with things like period pains and sleeping. At the time, I didn't really understand the science behind it. I just knew it helped. Later on, when I started learning more about the biology and the endocannabinoid system, it began to make so much more sense why cannabis have those effects. In 2003, I grew my first plant. It was AK-47, and that really began my journey into cultivation and learning about the plant properly. From there, I became more and more involved in cannabis education and activism in the UK. For many years, I was part of cannabis reform movement. I worked with patient advocacy groups like United Patients Alliance, where I represented South Yorkshire, which was one of the most active regions in the movement at the time. I was also involved with Sheffield Cannabis Club. Much of my role there was running the page, sharing information and helping educate people about cannabis and safer use. Alongside that work, I also worked with a compassion club in Spain. That was more hands-on work, supporting patients and helping people understand cannabis oil and to use it more safely. During that time, I've also hosted and took part in a number of cannabis radio shows where we discuss cannabis education, patient use, and wider cannabis movement. I even did radio show discussions with Rick Simpson, who many of you may know for popularizing cannabis oil in the early cannabis medical movement. One of the areas I became particularly focused on was helping patients understand cannabis oil more safely. At the time, there was a huge amount of confusion and misinformation, and many very sick people were trying to figure things out on their own. Because I have a science background, I spent a lot of time researching things like cannabinoid ratios, dosing, and the importance of testing so that people could make safer and more informed decisions. I also created the Sarah Sativa website, where I wrote articles explaining cannabis science and harm reduction in a way that was easy for people to understand. At one point, the site was getting over 21,000 views, which showed just how many people were looking for clear, accessible information. Eventually, my journey brought me to Spain, where I became involved in the Cannabis Club model. Today, I run Shambhala CSC, and through this channel, I want to start sharing some of the knowledge and the experiences I've gained over the past 20 years, from activism and patient advocacy to cannabis science and the reality of running a cannabis social club. So if you're interested in the cannabis education, cannabis culture, the history of the movement, follow along.